Hey, hey. So whether you're like a data engineer or analyst or analytics engineer or kind of whatever space you're in and using data, one of the kind of constant things that comes up is data ingestion. And for years, people have been using tools like Fivetran to kind of connect their data to their warehouse or a bunch of other destinations. Now, Fivetran is a great tool, but its kind of reputation is that it's expensive. So, given that AI is now so rife, a lot of people are looking to see, like, okay, like which of these can we move into our own custom connectors or frameworks, or perhaps they don't even come to Fivetran because they've got a very bespoke ingestion setup that they need to run. And there just is no use to trying to build that into a Fivetran connector anymore because you can just get AI to maintain the code. But in the cases where you want to get away from Fivetran or try out a new framework, how do you do it? Well, today we're going to try an example of taking this Google Sheet Fivetran connector that, as you can see, takes data from a Google Sheet, chucks it into Snowflake for me. We're going to see what that would take to move into a data load tool or DLT pipeline and use Orchestra to kind of compare and validate the two and make sure that we've got the same outcome. And just to kind of mix it up a bit, I'm also going to get DLT to send this to BigQuery rather than to Snowflake. So let's crack on. First of all, we'll take a look at our original pipeline. So we have a very basic Orchestra pipeline with one task in it. And all this is doing is kind of executing our Fivetran connector on a schedule. So you can see here, it's just pinging that Google Sheets oil data connector. And that is just going to be running and loading into our Snowflake account, which jump into Snowflake just to validate. You can see here, Fivetran Google Sheets oil data. And it's not a very big sheet. It's just got a few things in it, but we're going to care about making sure the data is exactly identical when we move to BigQuery. Otherwise, what's the point? Cool. So how are we going to go about this? Well, if you've seen any of these videos before, it's obviously going to involve skills and Claude because what doesn't anymore? So we have our pipeline, and my Claude session has access to a bunch of Orchestra skills, which I'll kind of show you the repo for shortly. And I'm just going to ask it initially to look at this pipeline and just try its best to add a DLT Python task to this pipeline that does the same thing, but to BigQuery. And we'll just see how far Claude gets with the skills and that level of instruction to start with. And while Claude is discombobulating or fermenting or whatever it's doing, just to show you the Orchestra skills repo, which you can come and help yourself to for skills that are useful for building both Orchestra concepts and all sorts of other data engineering things, then this is the place to come and look for the stuff we use in this video. This can be anything from fixing pipelines to creating pipelines, checking your Orchestra account health, or in this case, we're going to be using things that kind of test data quality or help us actually build pipelines. But these are all here for you to use, try out, comment on, change, whatever you want to do with them, really. Awesome. So after a whole bunch of Claude flapping and a little bit of back and forth with myself to ask things like, you know, what's the sheet ID? What's the table or sheet name that you want to ingest? Some of those kind of like clarification points Claude did ask me, as well as kind of, confirming that I wanted to update the pipeline and, where to put it. Nothing too strenuous, just some design choices. And then, as you can see, it's updated our existing pipeline, including the name, to just have this Python DLT version of our ingestion running in parallel. So if we have a quick look, we can see that it's stored the actual script itself in Git so that it can be safe with our secrets, and it had access to a repo for this one. And it's also connected up our kind of default BigQuery connection in this repo using Python, and it's kind of ready to run. So we'll just give this a run and see kind of how it does. And as you can see, it's all run successfully. So if we take a quick look at the actual table and just make sure it's there, we can see that along with a whole bunch of DLT meta columns, we have our data table ingested into BigQuery. And we can even go a little further and just have a quick look at the code that it's written. So Claude has written a small DLT kind of module in my already existing DLT modules There's now maybe one that does Google Sheets, and it's not very long. You could come and review this, but ultimately we'll trust DLT to do its thing for this exercise. And this is lovely, but as far as migrations go, this is kind of only part of the way there. So next, we're actually going to use another skill to try and build an orchestra comparison pipeline for this. So we want another pipeline that is going to monitor the Snowflake table that Fivetran delivers against the BigQuery table that DLT delivers, and kind of monitor that on an ongoing basis and kind of validate that these data sets are materially the same. And as we continue to ingest them, that they are still materially the same. Because you're not realistically going to migrate tools unless you're sure you're still getting the same data delivered. And if you're getting it delivered in a different way, even, you're probably going to need to make some downstream changes. So we'll let Claude go away, bang this out, and come back and have a look. And after a little more finagling or whatever it is Claude does, here we are. We have a running and passing pipeline comparing these two tables. If we have a quick look, we can see that it actually queries BigQuery, queries Snowflake independently, and then sets those as outputs to the task, which it can then consume downstream and compare in Python. Now, if we had been going from Snowflake to something like Databricks or Snowflake to Snowflake, we could have used Orchestra's kind of compare tables tasks. But in this case, we're going to BigQuery, so it's a little niche, and Claude has actually decided that it's worth writing our own checks. But we can also then dig into the kind of custom checks it's written and see kind of what it's done. Claude seems to think these do match, and it's set it to pass. But if we wanted, we can go and look in the repo and actually see the underlying code. You can see on the right, it's called out for me that there were a couple of bugs that it's found. One includes a timestamp column not quite matching, which obviously is something you probably expect migrating from warehouse to warehouse. And also just a note that during the handling of these results, it didn't quite get column names from Snowflake, but whatever. Main thing is we have both a migration written from Fivetran to DLT and a pipeline to test and validate it that we can go and edit, monitor, run for as long as we like, or kind of do whatever with, really. All in very little time, very little setup. And I'm kind of almost there, ready to turn off Fivetran and move my ingestion to DLT. Awesome. So give it a go and let us know what you think. Cheers.